Good morning, and I hope it's a good morning. I hope New Orleans has treated you well, and if it didn't, I'm even more proud of you for being here, so thanks for coming. So I think the perfect place to start this morning is with the Dodo Bird. So for those of you who don't know how the Dodo Bird got its name, that happened when we discovered its island in the Pacific, right? And we're the alpha predator, we waded ashore, and the Dodo Bird, instead of fleeing for the hills, went, how's it going? Going extinct, as it turns out. But the truth of the matter is the Dodo Bird didn't have any smaller brain. Hey guys, welcome, come on in. The Dodo Bird had no smaller brain than any other bird. What the Dodo Bird lacked on its little remote island was a natural enemy, right? It didn't know how to flee, right? It didn't have an emotion called fear. Now, our ancient ancestors were a bit luckier. Evolutionary science teaches us that we had actually 6 solid basic emotions built right into our DNA. And what those emotions did was keep us alive for 50,000 years while we grew a brain, right? It took that time to do it. So the emotions we had were fear, obviously. When you're short, hairy, and lunch, running in terror is a great thing. Anger. Right? The other short, hairy tribe is coming to steal your fire. Oh, anger or survive, right? Surprise, right? It was, shit happened fast back when paleo was more than just a diet, so you had to react. Here's an interesting one, though. Disgust. How is disgust a survival skill? Well, it turns out we were all hungry back in the day, and what happened when you ran across a rotting corpse, and you look at it and go, oh, it's protein, right? Disgust was what kept us from eating it and bringing death and disease home to our tribe. And what about sadness? Sadness has an outward manifestation. And in those days, if you'd lost your mate, your tribe would rally around you, right? Close-knit. And close-knit tribes are surviving tribes. And finally, joy. Joy, you can chalk that one right up to procreating the species, right? It doesn't feel good for nothing. So nature gave us all these emotions. Let's call it a Cro-Magnon toolbox. And what that toolbox did was kept us alive until this brain came along. And then the brain came along and said, I got this. Thank you. Thanks for coming. And the emotions kind of got shunted off to the back seat, right? And that's true today. If you think about it, if I were to ask you how you think, right? Your attorneys, you're strategic, you're analytic, you could probably give me a pretty good idea of the way you break things down. But if I ask you how you feel, I'm probably going to get a lot of, I feel pretty good. All good. Yep, I'm doing fine. All good. Yep, great. I might even get an occasional, what the hell kind of question is that, right? Because nobody really talks about emotions. It's just not something that we discuss. And part of the reason is we grew up in the IQ age. IQ, your intelligence quotient, it told you how smart you were. But isn't it funny that nobody really ever told you what your score was? Remember that? Mom, what's my IQ? Oh, I can't tell you, honey, but your sister. And then there was this anomaly that happened in IQ research. It kept happening over and over, and it was this. 70% of the time, people with average IQs do better in life than people with high IQs, 70% of the time, which baffled the previously unbaffleable IQ research set. But then they started looking into emotion and how emotion affects thought and how thought affects emotion, and that's how emotional intelligence kind of was born. Came out of back half of the last century in academia, white papers, research. And then there was a book written by a man named Daniel Goleman, and he wrote a book called Emotional Intelligence, Why It May Be More Important Than IQ, and it kind of crystallized and popularized the idea. And that was '95. So there's been all this research done since then on emotional intelligence, come up with some pretty startling things. One, you know that your intellect only controls about 1/5 of how you do in the world? 20%. The rest is over in the emotional realm. Bet your mom didn't know that. 90% of top earners in the workplace have high EQ. If you have high emotional intelligence, you're likely to be earning $28K more than people with lower EQ. Corporations are now starting to fully adopt the idea that their leadership needs to understand their employees on a more solid emotional basis. They're teaching it in schools now. School kids are learning about their emotions, how to deal with them in social situations. There are tests now that you can take to establish your EQ. I want to get into this, but I'm going to. I saw this one data set of a lot of people who had taken this emotional intelligence test. It was broken out by occupation, and you should see doctors. They're like way down here, just slightly lower than. Yeah. Well, and then the Harvard Business Review got their teeth into this, and they called it a game-changing, paradigm-shifting idea, right? So what the hell is emotional intelligence? Well, in the biggest sense, it's the ability to do what our ancestors did. Use your emotions in a positive way to help your life, right? But it breaks down into 4 basic ideas. 1, understanding your own emotions. Number 2, being able to moderate your emotions. Number 3, understanding the emotions of the people around you. And 4, being able to positively influence other people in an emotional way, right? But it all starts with self-awareness, understanding what's going on inside you, right? We go, well, yeah, I know that. But how many of us have gone through days where you just feel kind of crappy, or you're bugged, or you got some kind of existential hum going on, and you don't know where it comes from? And the irony is, as much as none of us want to be ruled by our emotions, you'd be Jim Carrey and Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, you get stuck in it, right? We've all done that. We're stuck in this thing that muddles us through. And it doesn't go away. And science also tells us that emotional suppression, they've done a lot of studies on this. If you suppress your emotions, not only do they not go away, they get stronger. You know, like Glenn Close in Fatal Attraction, I won't be ignored, right? So what do? You stop. You stop yourself, you close your door, you take 5 minutes to go, all right, what's going on? What's happening here? What's going on in here? And the great thing about our gigantic brains is we have the ability to turn them on ourselves. We can self-examine. We can reflect on what's going on. And if you dig down there, guess what? You can find the trigger point to pretty much any emotion you've got. And there you got it. How different is that from a new case coming in, a new matter coming in? What do? You look at the case. You look at the truth of the case. What's there? And then you start looking at how you're going to approach it. Same thing with emotion. What's there? And once you find what it is, then you can start to do something about it. Emotional self-management, and I'm not talking about the kind we all did out there in the night last night. I'm talking about simple, healthy ways for you to kind of deal with this emotion that you're looking at, right? I'm a writer. I tend to write everything down. If I'm bugged about something, I'll take 5 minutes, and I set my clock. And my one rule is I can't stop for 5 minutes. I got to write for 5 minutes about this thing that's going on. I dump it all out on the page, and then, of course, look for a shredder. But everybody can do it a different way. Music, awesome way to kind of change how you're feeling, right? Put on music that reminds you of another time or some other thing, takes you out of that emotion. Exercise is awesome. Getting air, taking a walk, getting into nature, hug a damn tree, whatever it is that you do to change it up. Call a friend. Women are really great at this, men not so much. Go to see a therapist, right? Did that, worked. I grew up in the South, a male, German distraction. I had no idea how to communicate. Then I got married, and I had to do this thing every day called show up. And I failed miserably at it. I had no idea how to do it. And I went to the therapist and told that. He goes, well, why did you think you really could do that? Someone taught you how to do that? Can you speak Hungarian? So, you know, that began that sort of path of learning, right? And I'm not going to even talk about meditation. Well, yes, I am. I'm actually going to talk about meditation for a second. I'm not talking about the touchy-feely, squishy sense of meditation. Science looks at meditation as deep breathing, learning how to deep breathe. Ton of research on that as well. And what it's shown is that even in as short a time as 8 weeks, learning how to deep breathe, it actually physiologically changes your prefrontal cortex. It grows gray matter in the area that deals with short-term memory and executive decision-making, 2 things that might be important for attorneys, I don't know. But not only does it relieve stress and change negative emotion, it helps make your big brain bigger, right? And we all know size matters. So, and an interesting thing will happen once you start controlling your own emotions and adapting them into a better place. You start understanding the emotions of other people around you. Once you start recognizing yourself, you see other people, you recognize facial expressions a little differently than you would before. Body language differently than you would before. That'd probably be pretty good in a negotiating sense, right? You're sitting across the table from someone and you pick up things. So really, understanding what other people are about makes you a more empathetic person. Empathetic. The difference between sympathy, obviously, sympathy, I feel sorry for someone. Empathy, I get what they're going through because I'm filtering it through my own emotions, so I understand them better, right? And once you're more empathic, that's a game changer. You become a better listener. In the office, you can build consensus better. You probably solve conflict more quickly. Communication goes way up. Productivity and profitability probably goes up as well. But the biggest thing is you end up with better relationships with your family, with your friends, with your colleagues, and also with clients, right? I mean, imagine that you've got your best client, right? You take him out to dinner once a month, and it's always great, and his name's Bob, and this particular night, Bob is not very happy. And he confesses to you that his wife of 20 years left him. So, sympathetic response. God, Bob, sorry to hear that. Let me know if I can do anything. Check that box. Empathetic response. Yeah, I've been through something like that. I remember that. It's horrible, and I'm sorry, and talk to me about it, right? So trust is the key to great relationships, and if Bob trusts you as an attorney in a legal sense, imagine how much more he will trust you, on a DNA or emotional level. That's a client you'll probably always have. So that's just part of the power of empathy. And finally, positively influencing other people, right? Other than just making you a general better citizen of the world, right? In leadership circles, especially in corporations, they're now, when they hire, they're looking not only at your CV, where you're in school and where you've been working, but how well you're going to deal with your teams in an emotional way. And they probably don't say emotion, but it's about connectivity. It's about the human connection between leaders and teams. And if I'm on your team and I can come to you and talk about things that are more than just like what's going around in the office, there's a huge amount of trust that's built there. And again, it's productivity, profitability, all of those things go up when you're working at that level. Also with mentorships, right? Imagine you're a mentee of someone and they're dispensing bon mots for you to follow in your business. Okay, I'm going to figure this out. But imagine someone who's talking about their experience, going, here's how I screwed this up. Here's what I learned from it. Be a human being. It's okay to fail. You'll get through this too. So there's a ton of stuff in that regard too. And if you're interested in diving into emotional intelligence, there's lots of research out there. It's a really interesting road to start down. And I just want to leave you one more thought. We all are talking about now, instead of emotional intelligence, artificial intelligence, which couldn't be any more opposite, right? Artificial intelligence is going to take over the legal industry. What I find really ironic and compelling is that no matter how much it does, computers and AI are never going to replace the sort of basic stuff that we had in our DNA before we could even think. So, rattle around in your Cro-Magnon toolbox, embrace the fear, understand your anger, let surprise happen. Don't eat disgusting food. Share your sorrow with others, and please, learn to live in your joy. And don't be a dodo. You might live on the planet a little longer. Thank you.